The Tudors are the most notorious family to have ever ruled over England, with their kings and queens being associated with brutality, execution and ruling with an iron fist. Henry VIII, the king who had 6 wives, 2 of which were executed inside the Tower of London, was the second Tudor king, and it was his father who was the first Tudor monarch. Henry VII came onto the throne in 1485 after defeating Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth field. He seemingly ended the Wars of the Roses, uniting the country by his marriage to Elizabeth of York, and he sought to restore power and stability in the English monarchy. For years the Wars of the Roses had led to the people of England lacking the stability required in the royal family. Henry VII reigned for roughly 24 years before he passed away at the age of 52. Today we look at the painful death of King Henry VII, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Henry VII was declared king by the right of conquest, and he married Elizabeth of York with the hope of uniting the warring Yorkist and Lancastrian factions of the Plantagenet dynastic disputes. He was considered successful in this, and he took steps even after the Battle of Bosworth to ensure that rebellions did not become significant. He did face a number of them initially, including one which the pretender Lambert Simnel claimed to have been Edward of Warwick. His rebellion was put down, and Henry, in a show of clemency, allowed Simnel to work inside the royal kitchens after, placing him in charge of roasting meat on a spit. Perkin Warbeck's rebellion came in 1490, when he claimed to have been Richard of Shrewsbury, the younger prince in the Tower, but Henry VII put this rebellion down also, and had Warbeck executed. Through a number of executions, including that of William Stanley's, the Chamberlain of the household, Henry showed the country he was not willing to be messed with. He was a king ultimately that had little experience in running lands and overseeing them, but during his reign he became known for being a wealthy king who was prudent and made the monarchy richer. He kept a close eye over the country's wealth and did impose a number of taxes. The increase in tax and the ruthlessness in which it was collected did affect his popularity inside of England. In terms of his foreign policy, he sought to maintain peace following the Wars of the Roses in England and to make money. He signed a treaty with France that brought wealth to England and importantly stated that France would not support any more pretenders claiming to take the throne. Henry did invade Brittany in November 1492, as he wished to keep it from the French, as they had recently signed an agreement and alliance with Spain that he deemed to be dangerous. He built up his navy for this, and he realised the importance and danger of the Spanish kingdom. He also formed an alliance with the Holy Roman Emperor and the Pope. He was shrewd along with his advisors around trade, and through major industries such as wool and cloth, England became a rather prosperous nation. English cloth during his reign began to become traded in different places. To secure his power further, he used justices of the peace on a big scale, and their job was to ensure that the country's laws were being adhered to. The Court of the Star Chamber was also used to allow Henry to deal with disputes and issues quickly, and he dealt with threats to his own power swiftly through this. Justices of the peace were seen as key law enforcers for Henry VII, and despite being unpaid, they were successful and efficient. So overall, during his reign, Henry VII did have a significant degree of positive things to ensure that the monarchy was much more stable than it was during the Wars of the Roses. However, in 1502, tragedy struck the royal family. Henry VII and Elizabeth had a child named Arthur, who was the great hope for the Tudor dynasty. He was their eldest son and was the heir apparent to the throne, and had married Catherine of Aragon, forming an alliance between England and the emerging and feared Spanish. However, shortly after the marriage, Arthur was taken ill, and at Ludlow Castle he died from a viral illness known as the sweating sickness. This devastated the king, and he was regarded as a reserved man who rarely showed any emotion in public. However, he was overcome by immense grief and upset. He was known to have been sobbing uncontrollably at court, and the death of Arthur shattered him greatly. But a year later, further upset for the king came, as his Queen Elizabeth of York passed away, and he shut himself away following this for a number of days and refused to speak to anyone. Henry was completely devastated by the loss of Elizabeth, and her death caused him great heartbreak. Following her death, he considered remarrying, but nothing came to anything. He considered marriage to renew alliances with Spain, but through the negotiations for Catherine of Aragon to marry his other son Henry, the future Henry VIII, this was seen as sufficient. He did take an interest in Johanna of Naples, but this never came to anything. After Elizabeth's death, Henry himself became very ill and nearly died from an unknown illness, but he did recover. He remained ill for a number of years, and in his final years it was noted how his sickness increased daily more and more. Between February and March 1508, Henry suffered from gout, and it was said he was in the very last stages of consumption in July 1508. A month later it was reported that Henry was very ill in extremis, and that he was very ill with little hope of recovery. By the end of March 1509, Henry must have known that his death was coming soon, and he made his last will and testament. It's believed that the decline in his health was made quicker by the death of Elizabeth and Arthur, and his mood became very depressed after these. Other veterans of his campaign against Richard III had passed away, and he made arrangements for a seamless transition of power to his son Prince Henry. Accounts of Henry VII's death came mostly from Bishop John Fisher, who had a sermon on the 10th of May 1509, shortly after the event. He said how 2 nights before the king's death, he became so weak that he could not hear mass at the altar, and had struggled for some time to eat and drink. However, he was keen to do his religious duty, and he summoned his confessor to his bedside to hear the sacrament. Mass at his bedside was heard, and it was said to have been a very moving spectacle. It was said that those who witnessed Henry receiving the sacrament were moved with a marvellous compassion and flow of tears, that sometimes they wept and sobbed by the space of 3/4 of an hour. An image of the proceedings shortly before the king's death shows him attended on by a number of his closest courtiers and most intimate members of his household. Shortly after hearing the religious blessing, Henry managed to cling on to life for another 48 hours. On the day of his death, he heard Mass again, and this time held the crucifix a number of times with great reverence, embracing it tenderly and kissing it. He was in a significant amount of pain and was suffering and was scared, and he in his final moments appealed to Jesus to deliver his soul and to protect him. It was said he claimed, "O my blessed Jesus, O my Lord, deliver my soul from the misery of this world, deliver my soul from these deadly pains, deliver my soul from this corruptible body." In his final moments, the king's son Prince Henry, who was just 17 at the time, was summoned to his father's bedside for his final instructions, and the king said, "Fatherly and godly exhortations committed unto him, the laborious governance of this realm of England." The king passed away, surrounded by his closest advisers, with William Fitzwilliam, the gentleman usher of Henry's office, being responsible for closing the king's eyes after death. Inside of his bedchamber in Richmond Palace, on the 21st of April 1509, Henry VII died from what it's believed to have been tuberculosis at the age of 52. He was buried in the chapel he commissioned to be built, Henry VII's Lady Chapel in Westminster Abbey, and was laid to rest alongside his wife, Elizabeth of York. It was clear in his final days Henry VII knew what was coming. He ultimately knew what he was facing, and he decided to end his days in pious prayer and repentance for any sins he had committed. Inside of Richmond Palace, he was not alone, being attended on by his closest advisers and friends. It was his son who would take the throne and become Henry VIII, and his reign in particular is known for brutality and turmoil. Henry VII sought to bring an end to the turbulent nature of the time, but Henry VIII, his successor, ripped up all of the work his father had done and changed the face of English history forever, dividing his nation further by religion. In fact, Henry VIII drove as big a wedge through the population by his religious reforms as the War of the Roses ever did. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe And once again, thank you so much for watching.